Hi. How have you been?
Good, Scott.
Not too bad.
If you join me, I'm taking time there at school.
Hey, can you guys hear me okay? Rabbi Dan, I'm just on the Zoom right now. Can you hear the music in the background? Melissa, Barry, can you hear? Okay. In case, Marcia, can I make you a co-host just in case anybody else shows up? Okay. Okay. Can I do that? All right, I'll be right back, everybody. All right. Hi, everybody. How are we doing? Oh, again, I feel like I'm cheating and I get to take it off and everybody else has to keep theirs on. Ann Lieber, how are you? Oh, Val Lieber. Oh, it's great to see you. How are you? It took me a second. I was like, that's fantastic. That makes me very happy to see you guys together. How long are you in town for? I guess that's a part of it, right? It's never long enough, but longer than usual is still a pretty good starting point. And Shabbat Shalom to all of our friends watching on the stream and our friends watching on the Zoom. I think we have so many different things now, I'm not even sure what direction to look in, but I'll try my very best. So Neil, what was your favorite run? You were having such a good time that the name didn't even matter. What kind of level of skiing are we talking, though? Whatever it is in front of you, that's what you do? Well, those ones stand out for me too, right? There is a certain point where terror plays a certain kind of big burn. Snowmass was always my grandfather's favorite. Of all the places that he skied, that was always his favorite one. A lot of blues, which is nice. A lot of big, wide open blues, which I remember. Good for you. Your rabbi too, for whatever that's worth. I don't think I have that kind of power over you, but nonetheless. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. All right, Keelan, you over there? It's funny. It's like all I can see is a podium, but I assume you're there. You're good. All right, so let's start our normal, regular kind of way. Good Shabbos, everybody. We're going to turn to page 120 and light and bless our Shabbat candles. Again, page 120. If you have candles at home, you are welcome to light there as well. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. We'll turn now to page 130 and begin Kabbalat Shabbat together at the very top of the page. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai. Naria, naria, letzori shenu nekadma fana betoda. Naria, naria, letzori shenu bizmirot naria lo. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai. Psalm 96 is on page 131. Shiru l'Adonai, shiru shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz, shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, asru meyom leyom yeshuato, shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, asru meyom leyom yeshuato, shiru l'Adonai, shiru shir chadash, Shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz, shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, asru meyom leyom yeshuato, shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, asru meyom leyom yeshuato. We turn down to page 132, or Zaru at the bottom of the page. Or zaru ala tzadik uleishrei lev simcha. Or zaru ala tzadik uleishrei lev simcha.
Or Zarua Lahatzadi Ulei Shrei Lev Simcha Or Zarua Lahatzadi Ulei Shrei Lev Simcha.
Turn now to page 134, Zamru Adonai at the top of the page.
Zamru Adonai Bechinor Bekol Zimra B'chatzotzrot Bekol Shofar Aharim Lifnei HaMelech Adonai Hiram Hayam Ulo Tebel Ve'yoshvei Ba Neharot Yimcha Uchav Yachad Harim Yiraneinu Lifnei Adonai Kiva Lishmon Haaretz Yishmot Temel B'tzedek Be'amim Be'mesharim Hiram Hayam Umlo Tevel Ve'yoshvei Va Neharot Yimcha Uchav Yachad Harim Yiraneinu.
We turn now to page 135, Romamu, the last Hebrew paragraph in the middle of the page.
Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu le'akodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu le'akodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu le'akodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu le'akodsho.
Turn now to page 136,
Mizmor leDavid, Avul Adonai b'nei Elim, Avul Adonai kavod va'oz, Avul Adonai kevod shemo, Ishtachavu l'Adonai be'adrat kodesh, Kol Adonai al hamayim, Hakavod yirim, Adonai al mahayim rabim, Adonai al mahayim rabim. Kol Adonai ba'koach, Kol Adonai behadar, Kol Adonai shover harazim, Vaishaber Adonai et arzei halvanon, Vayakidehem kemo egel, Levanon ve'Sirion, kemo ben Reimim, kemo Adonai chotzev lavot esh, Kol Adonai yachil midbar, Yachil Adonai midbar kadesh, Kol Adonai yechol elayalot, Vayechesov ye'arot, Uvechalo kulo mekavod, kulo mekavod, kulo mekavod. Adonai lama bu yashav, vayeshev Adonai melech leolam, Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom.
We'll turn now to L'chad Odi on page 138, and a reminder, we'll do the first, second, fifth, and ninth paragraphs, and for the final paragraph, we'll rise, and for those in the room, we'll face back towards the door we walked through.
Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat mekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat mekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat mekabela. Dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Ishmianu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad u'shemo echad, L'shem u'tiferet v'litila. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelecha, Ki hi mekor haberacha, Merosh mikedem nesucha, Sof maaseh b'machshava tchila. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Hitoreri, Ki ba'orech kumi uri, shir daberi, Kevod Adonai alayich nigla. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Bohi v'shalom ateret balam, Gam besimcha u'vetzolam, Toch emunei am segula, Bohi chala. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Hey, please be seated. We're now on page 140, Tzadik Katamar, where the Hebrew indents in the middle of the page.
Sadikatamar Yifrach Keres Balvanon Your eyes and body or spirit as we turn to page 144 for the Chatzi Kaddish. Yitkada v'yitkada shemei Rabba v'alma divrach yerutei v'amlich malchutei v'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol veit Yisrael b'gala u'v'izman kariv v'meru. Amen. Yeshme Rabba mevarach le'alam li'almei almaya yitbarach Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalam shemei dekudsha b'richu leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damihiran behama v'yimeru. Amen. Remain standing as we turn to page 146 for the Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. That's the responsive part, people. That's the responsive part. You did? I couldn't. Thank you, Elise. Thank you very much. Well, but you're a rabbi. You know, that really you should be up here. I should be down there. Anyway, please be seated. All good things, you know? Do it again. You know what? Next week. That's the great thing about Shabbos. It comes back again next week. We'll keep practicing. No, I knew you were all there. I just thought maybe, intimidated by all the excellent singers around and just didn't want to raise your voices. But in any case, we are now on page 148. We'll read together in English at the bottom. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzvaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening. Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil beyom uve laila, Adonai tzvaot shemo.
El Chai V'Kayam Tamid Yimloch Aleinu Leolam Va'ed Baruch Atah Adonai Amahari V'Aravim. We'll turn now to page 150, and we'll read together in English at the bottom of the page. Everlasting love you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Ki ehem chayinu ve'orech yameinu, v'hem negei yomam v'layla, v'avatcha al tasir mimenu li'olamim, baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Please join me on page 154. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavcha hayom al levavecha ve'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha ולכתך בדרך, ושוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך, ובשעריך. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. Read together on the top of page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot. That wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt. There is a better place, a promised land. But the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness. That there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. As we turn to page 158, Micha Mocha at the top of the page. Ya bye bye bim 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 bam, ya bye bye bim bam, ya bye bye bim 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 bam, ya bye bye bim bam, ya bye 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 bye, ya bye bye bim bam, ya bye 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 bye, ya bye bye bim bam. Mi chamocha bailim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar bakodesh, norat hilot sefelet, norat hilot sefelet. Ay bye bim 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 bam, ya bye bye bim bam. Ay bye bim 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 bam, ya bye bye bim bam. Ay bye 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 bye, ya bye bye bim bam. Ay bye 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 bye, ya bye bye bim bam. Malchutecha ra'u vanecha bokeam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam zelianu ve'amru Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed v'nemar kifad Adonai et Yaakov u'golo miyad chazak mimenu baruch atah Adonai gal Yisrael. Let there be love and understanding among us, and peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up, waiting to do your will. Hashkivenu, page 160. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu le'shalom ve'amidenu Shomereinu lechaim, Ashkiveinu Shomreinu lechayim. Ushmor tzeiteinu. Lechaim u'shalom me'ata ve'ad olam. Ashkiveinu Adonai Eloheinu leShalom ve'hamidenu Shomreinu lechayim. Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Yerushalayim. Turn to page 162, Vishamer at the top of the page. Veshameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat לדורותם ברית עולם. עיני ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz uvayom hashevim Shabbat Shabbat ma'inafash. In a moment, we'll begin the Amidah together on page 164 and then continue silently from there. I'll invite those in the room to rise in body or spirit. Again, we'll begin together, page 164, and then continue silently from there. Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Yaseh shalom. Yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. We'll turn now to page 371 as we offer our Mishaberach, our prayer for healing. In a moment, I'll read our Mishaberach list, and we'll give an opportunity for those on the Zoom that want to add names in the chat, or any of our friends who are here with us this evening. But of course, in addition to our list, we extend our thinking this evening to the entire people of the Ukraine, especially those that have already been directly affected, and it's hard to imagine that there won't be a single person left in the country who's not affected. So we can make space in our hearts, certainly for those that we know, but those across the world who really need us tonight. So tonight we are thinking in our community of Gail Gambino, Ruvain Avraham ben Mordechai Va'ada, Chaim Bear Greenwald, Brad Friedman, Deborah Fogarty, Mike Klinghoffer, Chaim ben Yosef Fachava, Norma Polsak, Dina Batchana, Benzi Tepper, Cecilia Hirsch, Glenn Tinney, Tzipora Ahava, Gittel Bat Shmuel V'Aviva, Bruce Steger, Chana Ruth Bat Sarah, Jeff Baker, David Tosher, Jim Cohn, Monique Rathbun, Lindsay Epstein, Dolores Michka, Sylvia Oren, Yerachmiel Ben Hinda, Paloma Chauhan, Samuel Moskowitz, Chaim Leib, Joyce Weinberg, Stu Pollack, Jane London, Catherine Guarino, Judy Stern, Miriam Kornfeld, Raz Brody, Chana Ruth Bat Sarah, Fagel Tzipora Bat Elisheva Bat Sarah, Richard Gambino, Michelle Sawicki, Idol Basha Bat Yitzchak, Tzvi Benachem and Chaim, Rivka Bat Devora, Amy and Gavin Tucker, Janice Kurz, David Dowling, Israel Ben Yitzchak, Lorraine Danis, Buddy Kasaf, Shelley Newmark, David Kyle Klotman, Rivka Bat Rachel, Sarah Bat Chana, Moshe Eliezer Ben Sivia, Peretz Ben Yehuda, Leah Bat Naomi, Gedalia Ben Leah, Justin Banner, Tzipora Ahava Bat Yehudit Rachel, Jane Beard Cass, Amy Cass, Steve Levine, Ephraim Raphael Ben Esther, and Myra Maslin. In addition to the names that were mentioned in our chat, anyone else have anybody you're saying Mishaberach for tonight? We'll turn again, page 371, and we will offer our Mishaberach in the middle of the page. Mishaberach avotenu mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom, everyone watching at home. So, of course, as I imagine all of you, all of us, we come into this Shabbat thinking about something that I imagine most of us would never have imagined in our minds would be happening, certainly not after the experiences of the last century and the lessons we presume that we would have learned to see, an invasion taking place. And there is no question as to what it is or what its intention has been or how long it's been in planning. The reality is it's happening. And there is a real people, really on both sides of the equation, who are going to suffer. But the people of the Ukraine in particular, who are suffering as we speak. And unfortunately, I wish that I could say that I had an answer tonight, that I can stand up here and give some demonstrative sermon that is going to somehow or another bring the fighting to an end. And I think we all know that that's not going to be the case. So the question is, what do we do in moments like this? The obvious one we will end with, which is a consideration of the concept of peace and how it is that we pray for peace. But it occurred to me that this is also probably a good time for us as Jews to consider how is it that we think about warfare? How is it that we think about what determines a just war, a just defensive war, a just actionable war? How do we conceive of this very complicated question? How do we determine what is acceptable and what's not acceptable, and what do we do in the circumstances where that arises? And perhaps from understanding ourselves better, we can understand the role that we can hopefully play in trying to bring not just this fighting to an end, but fighting around the world. So there are many books that have been written about Judaism and warfare, specifically about how the Torah and then eventually how the rabbis construct and in many cases limit the potential or the possibility of fighting a war. Most of this conversation, of course, has been moot for much of the last 2,000 years. Without a state, without a home, without a country, without an army, we weren't generally involved in a whole lot of fighting directly ourselves, certainly not on a national level. But that didn't stop the rabbis for thousands of years for considering these essential questions, knowing that there may one day come a time in which war is necessary and in which we may have to act upon it. So of all the books that I've read, the one that I tend to come back to is written by Professor Reuven Kimmelman of Brandeis University, and he wrote a book called Warfare and Its Restrictions in Judaism. So you can already tell off the top of the bat, right, what the idea of this book is and where we are generally going within Judaism as far as we think about warfare. And he points out that beginning with the Torah and eventually codified by the rabbis of the Talmud and later sources, eventually Maimonides is sort of the first who really takes an attempt at codifying the laws as they relate to warfare in his Mishnah Torah. But it really begins with a lot of description, a lot of conversation in the Torah itself, because the Torah itself actually contains a tremendous amount of individual battles and battles against entire nations and of rules and of laws and of statutes and expectations. But that ultimately speaking, Professor Kimmelman basically says that in Judaism, really, in Jewish ethics, there really are two considerations. One is the question of the legitimization of the war itself. Is it a legitimate war? And the second is the question of the conduct. If you're going to engage in warfare, what is the conduct that is expected of you? And then ultimately speaking, the Talmud spends most of its time really trying to think about and to quantify and to qualify what are the legitimate times in which we can go to war and what are the legitimate times in which we can assist others in war. And they come to the determination that when it comes to Judaism, the only wars that are allowable under any circumstances, that are mandated wars, are wars that are described in the Bible itself. So what are those wars? Joshua's conquest of the land of Israel, of the 7 Canaanite nations that inhabited it at the time, the perpetual war that we're told against Amalek and Amalek's descendants, and ultimately speaking, any defensive war that has been launched against, in other words, as a reaction to. The key is that discretionary wars are considered basically an extreme, and in general are very significantly prohibited, if not restricted, especially as so far as who can start that discretionary war. So the question is, who ultimately has that power? One would think, right, if we were just guessing off the top of our head, in ancient Israel, who would have had the power to declare war? Any guesses? Don't think too hard on it. Very good, Val, right? One of our great heroes, or at least supposedly, right? King David, known for his military prowess, started many wars, as a matter of fact. Okay, King Solomon less so, but certainly had his moments. Saul, all of the kings of Israel at some point or another are engaged in some amount of war. And one might think, like most of the rest of Europe, most of the rest of the world, the king is the king, the queen is the queen. If they decide to go to war, you grab your spear and you go to war. Not so much for us. As a matter of fact, actually, there was a great concern on God's part first, and then on the part of the leadership of Israel, to give that much power to a single human individual. As I said, if it comes to biblically mandated wars, it doesn't take much. The king can authorize them. But anything other than that has to involve the Sanhedrin. Okay, so what is the Sanhedrin? Not to go too far into its history, but it's the idea of basically our first kind of national governing body, which was also sort of pseudo-religious. Not pseudo-religious, was religious itself, in which you have 71, Val? 71, I think that sounds right. It's good to have another rabbi in the room. Decision-making people, okay? But the key, as Professor Kimmelman points out, is that it's not about the individual people of the Sanhedrin. It's that the Sanhedrin as a body exists for one particular purpose, in that it is basically the decision-making body that is responsible and is the legal embodiment of popular sovereignty, what in Hebrew we refer to as the Adah. So again, as you may remember, I described this a few weeks ago, our temple's name, Adas Israel right, is the word Adah. It's a reference not just to the people of Israel, the people of Judaism, but ultimately speaking to this sort of concept of a legal embodiment of popular sovereignty, as he says. And then understanding that for the Jews to go to war in any way, shape, or form, this entity, this Sanhedrin, was necessary to represent both the concept and the needs of the people before the king. Because it was understood that kings, presidents, prime ministers, people who are singular in power, especially those who exist within a power system in which they are ultimately supreme, are ultimately co-opted by any number of reasons to begin to start wars with their neighbors or even across the world. And because the Sanhedrin is also, as I said, it's not a pseudo-religious body, as I said, it really is a religious body that is the authoritative religious body. It's the one that is meant to interpret the Torah, and in particular to interpret how it is that God is instructing us and what it is that we are meant to do. That the consideration of going to war is one that is taken with great gravity and is only done, as I said, in a circumstance in which there is really a justification. If there was a need to really go to war with a neighbor or to expand territory, it couldn't just be on the whim of the king or the queen. It couldn't just be on the whim of the powerful. That there needed to be an understanding from amongst the people that this was something that was necessary, and only because it was necessary could we act upon it. So I bring all this up to say that, yes, in our history, perhaps we haven't stuck to this as well as we might have, especially in recent history. But ultimately speaking, there's a very different way of thinking about warfare than most of the rest of the world in pretty much every conceivable corner of it. That usually the way that we've thought about war throughout history is that it is a means by which to expand, to take over others, to take over what is conceived to be necessary supplies or territory or strategic value. All of these things are the things that generally have driven wars, not just of the last 100 years or 150 years, but really throughout human history. And that part of the challenge, again, is when their decision-making is unchecked, when it is solely rested in one person. We see the results of that, and we're seeing it happen right now. And we see what one person who kept saying that he was going to do it, and most of us, myself included, didn't believe it was going to happen, couldn't believe it was going to happen, couldn't believe that in this day and age we would allow these kinds of things to happen, and yet here we are. And we see it take place. And of course, there's that part of all of us that says we should be, over there on the front lines, right, that we should be defending our friends and all of that. But of course, we know it's never that simple. And the fact is that actually one of the most dangerous things about warfare is the way that it breeds other wars, right, that it perpetuates itself, and that it is conceived of to be an answer in and of itself. So when I, this past weekend, was interviewing Professor Julian Zelizer, who just wrote a book about Rabbi Heschel, one of the books, the chapters of the book as he's writing about it was Heschel's position during the years of the Vietnam War. And he was an outspoken critic, ultimately, of the war, not because he was trying to create some kind of political identity for himself, but because he literally took it to the heart. He saw soldiers, he saw young people from the United States who were going over halfway across the world and who were dying in horrible ways. He saw innocent people who were being bombed, and it affected him deeply, and he wrote about it extensively. And in one of the pieces that he wrote, one of the most public of them, he writes this one line that I think is really quite powerful. And he says, "There is nothing so vile as the arrogance of the military mind. Of all the plagues with which the world is cursed, of every ill, militarism," and I'll emphasize not militaries, not soldiers, but militarism, "is the worst." And he says, why? The assumption that war is an answer to human problems. So he's, of course, Heschel was a complicated person. He understood the vicissitudes of life. Most of his family was killed in the Holocaust. He had every reason to want to become a violent person himself, to lash out at the world. And he chose very much the opposite route because for him, it wasn't just about a personal decision. It was what he found in years of studying Judaism and studying Jewish text and studying our sacred holding of life as a whole. Is not to say that we don't have a history of warfare. We do. Not to say that we don't have a history of, in some cases, brutal warfare. We do. Open the Torah anytime and you will see it. Read the prophets, you will see it in graphic detail. But there is always this piece of it that says we need to consider that war is, again, sometimes an inevitability, but oftentimes it's not. And oftentimes we allow it to become an inevitability because we stop trying to think of other means to achieve our goals. And here we had a situation that I am sure, with the right kind of people, with the right kind of mindset, without a demagogue on the other side pushing, that there could have been a solution to whatever it is that led to this moment. At least I believe that. I hope that I believe that. But But ultimately speaking, if we continue to believe that the answer to every one of our problems is going to be at the end of a bayonet, I think that history proves that empirically false. If that worked, we would be living in a very different world today. Like as I said, Judaism, as every one of us understands, war is unfortunate, but sometimes necessary. If we are going to fight it, we're going to fight it conscientiously and thoughtfully. We're not going to do it capriciously. We are going to hold sacred the lives not just of ourselves, but of those that we are fighting against, and even the land that we are attempting to fight upon. These are all things that are laid out in the Bible, in the Torah itself, by the rabbis, and to this very day. And as a last closing piece here, as I said, what is Judaism's real place in all of this is our concept of shalom, right? Our concept of peace and what that ultimately means to us and the creation ultimately of a world that doesn't yet exist. It's the reason that we pray for peace in multiple ways and multiple times throughout every single service. There isn't a single service that goes by without a prayer for peace. But I think in specific, and I know a number of my colleagues tonight are sharing this particular prayer, this is a prayer that was written by Reb Nachman. Reb Nachman, like many of the great rabbis of certainly the last couple hundred years, was from the Ukraine, right, and practiced most of his life in the Ukraine. Many of the greatest rabbis of the Hasidic world are Ukrainian in their origin. At a certain point in history, the Ukraine, or what would be described today as the Ukraine, was the epicenter of Jewish life in Eastern Europe. And Reb Nachman, again, a person who lived and saw horrible things happen to the Jewish community in the Ukraine and things that happened before his life and even during. And he would have been given every reason, just as Heschel, to turn violent, to turn angry, to turn bitter. And yet, he focuses most of his attention in the opposite direction. And he asks the fundamental question of what is the role for the pious person in a world full of violence and hatred. And he creates this prayer for peace as a focus, as a way for each of us to consider. Again, it may not seem like we can do much. Okay, the people in this room, unfortunately, we're not going to change the outcome, most likely, of this war. But peace is not insignificant, and if we think about it and we meditate on it and we consider our role to play in creating it, these are transformative things. These are things I believe deeply that we can act upon and we can change. And I think Reb Nachman's prayer is one of the most beautiful that has been constructed in this way. So I'm going to share it with you tonight, and as I share it with you, think about the words. Really let them penetrate your heart, and think about where it is, if you see any opportunity, any way, shape, or form that you can play a positive role in ending this war or any kind of conflict that arises in your world. That is really the essence of the Jewish life. So I first want to give credit to this particular translation. It comes from Rabbi Deborah Silver, and this was available on the RA's website. It contains a few different quotations. Reb Nachman's quotations are pulling from a few different places, Leviticus, Amos, Isaiah. You may hear some things that sound somewhat familiar and changed ever so slightly. May it be your will, Holy One, our God, our ancestors' God, that you erase war and bloodshed from the world, and in its place draw down a great and glorious peace, so that nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. Rather, may all the inhabitants of the earth recognize and deeply know this great truth, that we have not come into this world for strife and division, nor for hatred and rage, nor provocation and bloodshed. We have come here only to encounter you, eternally blessed one. And so we ask your compassion upon us. Raise up by us what is written in the prophets. I shall place peace upon the earth, and you shall lie down safe and undisturbed, and I shall banish evil beasts from the earth, and the sword shall not pass through your land. But let justice come in waves like water, and righteousness flow like a river. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Holy One, as the waters covered the sea. Ken yehi ratzon, so may it be. And together we say, Amen. Well, I'll invite everyone to rise in body or spirit as we turn to page 586, Aleinu L'Shabech.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, atet gdula liyotzeh breshit, shelo asanu, begoye haratzot, velo samanu k'mishpechot adama, shelo samet elkeinu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
And on page 591.
ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
I invite those in mourning and those observing yahrzeit to please remain standing. Everyone else may be seated at this time. We begin by thinking of those in our community and connected to our community who have passed in recent months. Dr. John Abderkin, Morris Dickstein, Faith Diskin, Linda Donath, Jay Fagan, Ellen Frank, Evelyn Gelb, Arthur Grossman, Gerald Hirsch, Mark Joseph, Deirdre Klein, Jeanette Kopp, Leo Leibowitz, William Lippman, Audrey Lubo, Morty Lynn, Jerry Monroe, Nancy Nagel, Harry Olstein, Geraldine Rosen, Harriet Roth, Jeannie Rubin, Howard Schreier, David Senft, Paul Silver, Marlise Silverberg, Blanche Sklar, Rita Sandra Snyder, and Joan Strong Tangzilius. We also mark the yahrzeits that occurred during the last week for Sylvia Birkin, Morris Busbang, Arlene Collins, Solomon God, David Gross, Ray Katz, Ida Klitnick, Herta Cohn, Harry Koplovich, Jay Krotman, Harold Levine, Estelle Liu, William Miller, Harry Osofsky, Herman Press, Jeannie Rodney, Samuel Sanborn, Celia Steinbeck, Joseph Tarlow, Sidney Tobias, and Leonora Yanovich. I invite anyone who is watching on our stream, if you have additional names to share, you are welcome to do so. And anybody in the room, St. Kaddish for anyone we didn't mention. So we'll invite our mourners to join me on page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayichon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, b'agala v'zman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam le'almei almaya. V'yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha b'richu. Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata ta'amiran be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shalama Rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. Okay, please be seated. Good Shabbos, everybody. Good Shabbos, Mark. Good to see you, man. How are you? Good. Take us in. All right, we're on page 645 in a moment. We'll do our closing song as I was singing and saying Reb Nachman's prayer, right? Reb Nachman's prayer contains a lot of different pieces, as I said, of our sacred text, one of which is one of the most iconic from Isaiah itself. At the bottom of page 645, we'll sing in just a moment. But before we do that, a few important announcements. First is to please join us for Shabbat services tomorrow morning. Again, those services on Saturday morning are only going to be either live streamed or available on Zoom. The Zoom thing is the newer piece, so if you want to be on with me, you're welcome to join. If you want to watch it on YouTube, Facebook, or the website, you are welcome to do that as well. And to join us for Torah study beginning at 12 o'clock. Also a reminder that next Shabbat Torah study is the first of the month, and so is our Women's Torah Commentary Torah study this month, or next month, will be facilitated by Julie Tatkan Kent and Lauren Tepper, who are co-chairs of our Anti-Semitism Task Force. So that, again, will be next Shabbat, next Torah study at 12 o'clock. And again, all are welcome to join. We also have a really interesting program this coming Sunday at 7 o'clock, still time to sign up. We are welcoming Mary Romney, who wrote a book called An Afro-Caribbean in the Nazi Era. And this is co-sponsored with us and the Southampton African American Museum and some of our dear friends who we've made over the last few years, especially as the Social Justice Committee has helped us to raise our awareness and to connect to the other parts of our community. So this is a great opportunity to learn about a subject that I very, very highly doubt many of us know about. And so again, please join us Sunday at 7 o'clock. We also have Maureen's Haven this Sunday as well. We still need some volunteers, so please contact Shelley if you are able to help out. This Monday, Nina Mitzvah will be meeting at 9 o'clock. My Heschel class, which has moved to 12 o'clock on Monday, Hebrew School is back in session in person at 3:30, and the Social Justice Committee has its regular meeting on Zoom at 5 o'clock. Beginning on Wednesday at 7 o'clock, we welcome Yiddish English Poetry Program that is being run by Joanna Furman and Yera Sugarman. This is again available Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And if you're a Yiddish person, and Yiddish people, got a Yiddish person here for sure. This is a good one to join us again Wednesday at 7 o'clock. My Friday class, Journey to the Heart of Siddur, is 9:15 on Fridays as well. Just a couple highlights. The upcoming month, as you will start to see if you haven't already, our monthly calendar for March. We are very excited that Alan Levin is going to teach another in his series of classes on the Jewish holidays. So this one will be focusing, of course, on what holiday is in March, people? Very good, Elise. I had a feeling you were going to get us first. Our resident Purim fan. So we are going to have, of course, our Megillah reading. This year will be on Zoom, hopefully for the last year that we'll do Purim and Zoom. But we're going to have a good time. My old man is going to join me in chanting some of the Megillah. So again, that will be, it doesn't say the date here, but if I remember correctly, it's mid-March on a Wednesday evening. So beyond that, I hope you will join us in at least some of these things. Captain Neil, I see, yes. Okay, so those that didn't hear that, March 7th, according to our builder, the roof is going on the temple, which is an amazing, that this week's pictures, by the way, in the E-Blast, if you didn't see them, it's amazing. And it's amazing what they got done in a span of less than a month in the middle of the winter with a snowstorm that happened in the middle of it. We're making really great progress, people. It's going to be great. So thank this guy over here on your way out for sure, because it wouldn't have happened without you. Well, yes, you could also thank Richard too next time he's here. But yes, Elise. It's the night of Purim. I don't think we have quite the motivated group to have the Shacharit Megillah reading, but, if people were so inclined one year, who knows? Mark will probably show up for that. There you go. Thank you, Lisa. Lisa says 16th. Okay, so mark your calendars. And of course, we want to wish a Shabbat Shalom to all of our streaming friends and all of our Zooming friends. For our Zooming friends, you're just going to have to give me a second. I'll have to go run and shut off this thing so you can talk to each other afterwards. But with that, again, as a parting word before we do our closing song, hold the people of the Ukraine in your hearts, as close as you can. It's a terrible thing to be seeing. So let us pray and really sing as hard as we can. On page 645 at the very bottom, before we do Kiddush tonight, we'll sing Lo Yisagoy, right? That the nation hopefully shall never lift up sword against nation again and never again study war. So there's a bunch of different melodies. I'm just going to go with whatever comes out of my mouth and sing with me if you can. Lo yisagoy el goy cherev, lo yilmedu od milchama. Lo yisagoy el goy cherev, lo yilmedu od milchama. Lo yisagoy el goy cherev, lo yilmedu od milchama. Lo yisagoy el goy cherev, lo yilmedu od milchama. Okay. I'll invite those at home, if you have a Kiddush cup handy, those that are here, if you would rise in body or spirit, as we turn to page 123 for Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam morei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon inchilanu. Zikaron lemahase v'reishit, ki hu yom techila lemikrae kodesh, zecher litziat Mitzrayim, ivanu v'acharta, ve'otanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, ve'shabbat kodshecha, be'ahava uvratzon, inchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha-Shabbat. Amen. Okay, L'chaim, Shabbat Shalom. And if you are with us here and you have a Siddur, if you could bring it back to Bob and Joe at the back there. It'll save them a lot of trouble. And thanks to Tom and Pat, our security guards, for keeping us safe. And wish all of you a Shabbat Shalom. Especially be careful going out. I think most of the ice is gone at this point, but let's just not risk it. Keelan, good Shabbos to you. Cantor Lauren, I believe, is back next week, so that'll be good. And I'm just going to go run and shut off something. And at least we got to set up a time. I'm sorry. Yeah, so don't leave. Just give me 2 seconds. Val, and enjoy your time together. It's wonderful to see you guys, Val especially. We'll get you back over here teaching stuff.
Hampton Bay?
The second floor